Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Okay, we are learning Iggeres Hakodesh of the Alter Rebbe, page 206, in the standard print of the Tanya. The second letter of Iggeres Hakodesh. The second letter, the subject of this letter this is written some 10 years or more, approximately 10 years after the previous letter. There's a Hayom Yom for the day after Tisha B'Av, which discusses this letter because it's the chitas of that week. We'll get to that later. The letter was written by the Alter Rebbe, as it says at the very beginning, Achar b'yosoi mipei beis, after he arrived from Peterburg, after the Alter Rebbe was released from prison on Yites Kislev. So however long it took for him to get back home from Peterburg, he then wrote this letter to the Chassidim. And the subject of the letter is twofold. The subject of the letter, the main part of the letter, is the Alter Rebbe giving thanks and explaining the Eibishter's chasadim, the Eibishter's kindnesses, and how to react and to deal with the kindnesses of the Eibishter. Then at the end of the letter, he discusses and tells his chassidim how to behave and how they should react in the community, which there's the how to react in the community, which was there was a lot of animosity to the chassidim. That's how the Alter Rebbe ended up in prison to begin with. The Alter Rebbe tells continues from this, how we should react to from here and onwards after we've been victorious. That's the theme of this letter. So he begins with Beis. Now, the commentaries in the Tanya point out that really the Beis should be earlier. It should be the beginning, Beis, and then it should say Achar b'yosoi miPeterburg if it's necessary. To put it in the context of when this letter was written after he returned from Peterburg. But so they say that it was the Alter Rebbe's son who made the Iggeres Hakodesh after the Tanya, after the Alter Rebbe's life. They added on these 32 letters. And the Beis comes here to signify the second era in the Alter Rebbe's leadership and in the Alter Rebbe's teaching of Chassidus. The Rebbe mentioned this numerous times. There's the Alter Rebbe as he was before Peterburg and the Alter Rebbe as he was after Peterburg, meaning the teachings of Chassidus before Peterburg were in one style, and post Yites Kislev, it changed completely in style, in more spreading of Chassidus. As we know in the story of Yites Kislev, when Alter Rebbe was in prison, he had visitors. He recognized one, and the other he didn't recognize. One was the Magid, and one was the Baal Shem Tov. And he came to the Alter Rebbe when he was in prison, and he asked them, "What's this all about?" And they told him that there's a Gzeira in Shemaim, and he asked, "Well, so what's going to be? Am I going to be allowed to continue?" And they said, "Not just you'll be allowed to continue, but you'll be able to do it even more and broader than you were doing it until now." So after Yites Kislev, the Alter Rebbe's teachings of Chassidus expanded, and in his method of expounding and teaching grew in a much more greater and bigger way because of the victory of Yites Kislev. So this is the significance of Achar b'yosoi miPeterburg. After he returned from Peterburg, begins a new era, and that's the Beis, symbolizing the second era in the Alter Rebbe's mission of spreading Chassidus. So he begins here with a pasuk. The pasuk is said by Yaakov Avinu, that when Yaakov is preparing to meet Esav, so we know in Parshas Vayishlach that Yaakov prepared in three ways. Remember, Rashi points out Yaakov prepared the meeting with Esav, and he prepared for battle, and he prepared with gifts, and he prepared thirdly by davening to Hashem. So what does he say in his davening when he's davening to Hashem? So he's asking Hashem to have mercy and help him and so on. And he's saying, effectively, I may not be worthy of Hashem's help, but nonetheless, I still am asking for it. Why am I not worthy of it? Because of the wonderful kindnesses that Hashem has already done for me. As we'll soon see, he left penniless. When he left Haran, when he left the house of his father Yitzchak, he left with nothing. And he comes back so many 20-something years later, he comes back a very, very wealthy man with lots and lots of cattle and animals and servants and gold and all the wonderful things that he accumulated all those years. One second. Okay. So he begins with a quote from this tefillah that Yaakov Avinu said. So Yaakov begins, Katenti mikol hachasadim umikol ha'emes umikol v'chulu. Katenti, I have become small. Word katan. From what have I become small? From mikol hachasadim umikol ha'emes. From all of the chasadim that Hashem has performed for me, all of the kindnesses, and etc. is ha'emes, and the truth. Okay, the Alter Rebbe is focusing over here on the chasadim part. That's why the emes is in the v'chulu. So what does this mean? Now there's two ways of looking at katenti, that I've become small. And without going into the nitty-gritty of it, there's a difference of interpretation between Rashi and the Rambam here on this pasuk in Parshas Vayishlach. Rashi says that katenti means that I've become small because of all the kindnesses that Hashem has done, so I perhaps don't have any credits left. The best example is, you have a mileage program, you get points. If you spend money on certain cards, you get points and miles and so on with your bank or with Tesco points and so on. And if you use out your points, you don't have any more points left, right? So the simple meaning of what Rashi is saying is that because of all the kindnesses that Hashem has already performed for Yaakov, he's concerned that perhaps he has no more credits. Therefore, he's perhaps not deserving. He doesn't have any points to cash in to be able to help him now with his next challenge. Because I've become small, my points account, my club card is diminished because I've used them, I've cashed them all in. That's the way Rashi interprets it. The Ramban seems to learn it that I myself have become small as a result of the favors. Meaning that not that the merits have become small, that he doesn't have any schuyas anymore, that he doesn't have any points anymore, but rather there's a diminution in the quality of who I am. That maybe I'm just not deserving of it. Not that I don't have the points for it, the merits are just perhaps not deserving of it. In any case, what the Alter Rebbe is going to do here is going to tell us an interpretation which more or less blends Rashi and the Ramban together. So that's the pasuk Pirush. So the Alter Rebbe begins to explain, what does this mean? Shebekol chesed v'chesed, Hakodesh Baruch Hu yisel adam, that with every kindness that Eibishter performs with a person, what should be the person's reaction to the kindness that Eibishter performs? The reaction should be that for every chesed, a person should be a shval ruach, should become very humble. Not just shval ruach, but shval ruach b'ma'od. Very much so. Why? Why should that be the reaction? Now, before we read what Alter Rebbe is saying, a very high and great person, the queen, calls you up on the phone, lahavdil. You get a call from her today. Hello, yeah, and she wants you to come and meet her. Where are they now? In Windsor Castle, wherever they're celebrating this holidays. This year they're somewhere else. They changed the venue. They're not in the regular place. Yeah, and she wants to come and meet with you, and she wants you to come over, and she wants to give you a gift, whatever it is, personal, private. So what's going to be your reaction? Of course, you'll be very excited, yeah? But what's it going to make you feel? Are you going to feel humble, or is it going to make you feel when you get back and you won't believe where I was? You won't believe where I just came back from. Are you going to show off and you're going to tell everybody how excited you are? And look at you, you've never been invited by the queen. And I just had tea with the queen. She called me up and I went down there and I just got back. In other words, there's two reactions that you could have. There can be a reaction where you feel very great and pompous in yourself that you just had tea with the queen. Rightly so. It's a tremendous thing. Or the reaction can be that you feel extremely humbled and feel very small in yourself as a result of this closeness. So I'm not asking to take a vote how you would feel, but this is what the Alter Rebbe is talking about over here. That when one experiences a tremendous chesed from the Eibishter, what should be the reaction? There could be a reaction of feeling very pompous about oneself. So the Alter Rebbe is saying that the reaction should be that the person should be extremely humble. Shval ruach means humble, b'ma'ed, very much. Now, why should that be the reaction? Why shouldn't I feel really great about myself when the Eibishter performs a kindness with me? Why shouldn't I feel smug and good about myself? So he explains, because what is chesed? Chesed drei yemina. Chesed is, as it says in the Zohar, is the right arm. Chesed is the Eibishter's right arm. And what happens when the Eibishter is giving to a person a lot of chesed? V'yemini techabkeni. As the pasuk says in Shir Hashirim, it's the right arm which techabkeni, which embraces me. It's a pasuk in there in Shir Hashirim. In Chassidus, the Alter Rebbe explains, the pasuk says, "Smoile tachas l'reishi v'yemine techabkeni." His left hand is under my head, and his right arm embraces me. So the Alter Rebbe explains that what is this talking about? This is talking about the month of Tishrei. We have Tishrei that can be divided, in general terms, Tishrei can be divided into two parts. What we call the days of awe, and then there's the days of joy. The days of awe is the Eibishter's left arm. His left arm is under my head. He picks us up. That's the head, the Reish, the head of the year. And then Sukkot comes, the embrace of the Eibishter, symbolized by the embrace of the Sukkah. That's the embrace. Yemina, with his right arm, he embraces me. So he's holding with his left hand, he's holding my head, and his right arm embracing me. So the chesed, which is drei yemina, which is the right arm, and the right arm is what the Eibishter's right arm is embracing me. Shehi b'chinas kirvas elikim mamash. What is this? This is referring to a state of kirvas elikim, of closeness from the Eibishter, mamash, actually. And a state of closeness b'yeses ha'eis, much more than it was milifnim beforehand, much more intense. That's what this is talking about. That when the Eibishter performs a chesed with a person, he's expressing a sentiment of closeness much more than it was before he performed the chesed. In other words, that every chesed that the Eibishter performs with us, he's bringing us closer. It's an embrace, it's a hug from the Eibishter. So what should be our reaction from this hug? The Alter Rebbe said the reaction should be extreme humility. So he explains why. So first he explains what is a chesed. A chesed is this embrace. Now whoever is brought close to the Eibishter, very much, more than ordinarily. In other words, there's an ordinary chesed. We have what we would call here the ordinary chasadim. The Eibishter performs with us is we wake up every morning, Baruch Hashem, we can say Moidani, and we can thank God for all the wonderful things that we take for granted. Right? We have to be taught to say Moidani. These aren't things that come natural. We're trained and we taught. Our parents taught us, or we taught ourselves, we teach our children not to take anything for granted, and all the wonderful gifts of life, and they are. Just because they happen every day and we take them for granted doesn't mean that they're not chasadim. They are chasadim. Here we're talking about when the Eibishter goes above and beyond, more than what we consider to be regular chasadim, and the Eibishter expresses an embrace, a kindness to us, which this was really special what the Eibishter did for me today. What we would call out of the ordinary. So he's saying, much more than it was milifnim, than it was before. The kindness that David performed for me, which was over and above the regular, again, using the term routine kindnesses that Hashem performs for us. which usually is the stuff that we recognize as more unusual, the extra kindnesses, because we don't pay attention to the regular kindnesses necessarily. That's where we have to stop and think. We say bracha sheyotza, we say moidani, we say thanksgiving for the things which normally is taken for granted. Even for the food that we eat, it's thanking the Eibusher that we have food. It's not something that comes natural. A citizen of this planet doesn't say thank you for every piece of food that they get. It's taken for granted. We have to be taught, no, stop for a second and think where you get the food. Here, we're not talking about these things. Here, we're talking about the stuff that the Eibusher performs for us, the chasadim, that the Eibusher expresses to us, is much greater than milifnim, than what was before that. In other words, the regular stuff. And therefore, because we're experiencing a chesed, which is b'yeses, so we're having our closeness, which is b'yeses, which is more intense. And therefore, he continues, V'chol hakodesh el Hashem b'yeses, and therefore, whoever is closer or brought closer to the Eibusher b'yeses, more than it was before, or more intensely, and is being raised, therefore, higher and higher. When the Eibusher performs this kindness, it means he's elevating us. We're going higher and higher. The reaction to that needs to be the more a person is experiencing this out of the ordinary or extraordinary closeness from the Eibusher, where he's picking us up, the more elevated the Eibusher is picking us up, the more closer he's bringing us, the more has to be the shval ruach, the humbleness, lamata mata, to the lowliest level. The more smaller and lower should be our feelings in reaction to the higher and higher that the Eibusher is taking us. That should be the reaction. We should feel small and humbled by the kindnesses that the Eibusher is performing for us, the extraordinary kindnesses. More than the humility, obviously, that we should feel from the regular routine kindnesses. He brings a pasuk that tells us that illustrates this. Kasuv, as it's written in Yirmiyah, Merachek Hashem nirali. The pasuk says, "From afar, Merachek, God appears to me." In other words, what does that mean? The Eibusher is bringing us close, so he's not distant. What the Alter Rebbe is bringing for this pasuk is that when the Eibusher brings us close to him, we should feel humbled and small and distant from the Eibusher. It should awaken within us that sense of how far am I from the Eibusher. The Eibusher has become close to me, but where am I in my closeness with the Eibusher? What aroused this feeling and this idea within me? The fact that the Eibusher brought me close. So Mirachek Hashem nirali. From the distance, from afar, Hashem has appeared to me. And I realized my distance from him, so to speak, as a result of his closeness and me bringing me to him. Do I deserve this? Why would I deserve this? That's the sense of humility that it should generate within the receiver of this chasadim. Ukeneda, it's also known the kula kamei davke klei chashiv. The expression which we have from the Zohar, which is brought out many times, we've had it in Tanya earlier, that kamei, before the Eibusher, everything is considered as naught. Kalei, as nothing, chashiv is considered. So the expression is the kula kamei davke, the kula kamei klei chashiv. Before kamei, before him, kula, everything is considered as nothing. Where does that happen? Where does the consider of nothing happen? So the Alter Rebbe is kamei davke. Dafka, when it's before him. The more one is standing before the Eibusher, closer to the Eibusher, the more nothing one will feel. So the pasuk says, from a distance, the Eibusher revealed himself to me, meaning that from my distance, as a result of his revealing to me in this chasadim, I feel distant. And because I'm kamei, because before him dafka, therefore, kula kalei chashiv, therefore it's all considered as naught. In other words, kula kamei klei chashiv, as great as a person, as something may be, before the Eibusher, it's nothing, insignificant. The greater it is, in fact, the closer, the more insignificant it is. In came, and if so, shu kamei yeser. So therefore, kol shu kamei yeser, anyone who's more before him, so to speak, anyone who's more closer to the Eibusher, The more closer something is to the Eibishter, the more yeser, more kaloi, more loy, more not, the ayin v'efes. The more is like nothing, like non-existent. And the Eibishter performing a chesed is very much, kamei is bringing us close to him, because we said it's an embrace. So the more he's bringing us close to him, the more feelings of naught and nothingness and non-existence should be our reaction. This response that one should have to the chasadim of the Eibishter, this is what's referred to as the level of yamin of kedusha. This is the right side of kedusha. The Eibishter is expressing expressing his yamin to us, his right hand of chasadim to us, and therefore our reaction to that of extreme humility, not just regular but extreme humility, this is what's referred to as yamin of kedusha. This is also referred to as chesed l'Avram, the level of chesed which is symbolized by Avram Avinu. What's Avram Avinu? Where do we know Avram Avinu was chesed, that we know from Chumash. Where do we see Avram Avinu is this level of the reactive humility of Avram Avinu to the chesed? Shinem, as it says in Pasuk, in Vanochi, in Pashas Vayera, it says it. The Avram Avinu says, Vanochi offer va'efer, I am dust and ashes. In other words, it was the kindnesses that the Eibishter performed for Avram Avinu, which motivated him and brought out within him this extreme level of humility. What's the extreme level? Dust and ashes. You don't get more humble than that. And Avram Avinu used the term ofar and efer, dust and ashes. And this was his reaction to the chasadim of the Eibishter. So, back to Yaakov Avinu. So now we've explained, so when Yaakov Avinu is saying Kotenti, he's saying Kotenti, why? Because of all the wonderful chasadim that Hashem has performed for me. Not just like Rashi says, not just because I don't have any more club card points left. And not just because I am humbled because of the regular things Hashem has done, but rather the Eibishter has done for me tremendous things, as we're going to see now, and the reaction to that is humility. That's why Kotenti, as he says now. So Avram Avinu is Chesed L'Avram. That's the Yimin. This humility, which comes from the Chasadim, the kindnesses of the Eibishter, is also the character trait of Yaakov. Yaakov had it as well. And therefore, and with this characteristic, with this characteristics, he, so to speak, excused himself or justified his fear from Esav. What are you scared of Esav for? They wish that took you through saved you before. He saved you earlier when you traveled. He saved you from Lavan. Suddenly now you're scared of Esav. What's going on over here? What's the justification for Yaakov being scared of Esav? So he says, with this, based on what we just explained, why he had what should be the reaction to Chasadim, that's justified his fear from Esav. And it was no longer enough for him, the promise that Hashem gave him that I'm going to help you. After Chasai, his promise, the Eibishter's promise, Hashem promised him that I am with you and I will protect you wherever you go. In other words, the Alter Rebbe is forewarning a question here. You can say, what's Yaakov Avinu even worried about? The Eibishter promised you it's going to be okay. The Eibishter promised that I'm going to go and take care of you wherever you go. I'll protect you. So why are you davening that Hashem should save you from Esav? Didn't he promise you already everything will be okay? So he says, this is his justification of feeling small because of all the chasadim, because of his humility. Taka, the Eibishter promised me and everything, but I don't feel deserving of it. It made him exceedingly small and humble. So that even the promise that the Eibishter gave him, he still felt that he's undeserving of it. And therefore he's davening to the Eibishter, as the pasuk that continues, Hatzileni no. Save me. So why was he able to have, how is this an excuse to justify his fear from Esav, and that the haftacha, the promise from the Eibishter, is not good enough? Mipnei hayes koton Yaakov made be'enov. That is because Yaakov was very small, very much so, be'enov in his own estimation. Why? It wasn't a fake humility. It wasn't that he just, humility out of humility. It is a humility born from the Ribui HaChasadim, born from the multitude of Chasadim that Eibush had performed for him. And as the Alter Rebbe gives us an example, as the pasuk says, Kiva Makli, etc. For with my stick, my staff, etc. What is that? He says there in the pasuk, save me from Esav. Katoiti mikol chasadim. What are the chasadim? Kiva Makli avarti sayarden. When I first left, what did Yaakov have? All he had was his stick, his walking stick. He didn't have much more than that, if anything. Remember the Rashi at the beginning in Parshas Vayetze when he first left. Rashi tells us there that he had nothing because Esav couldn't go and kill him. He had to show his parents that he's not reacting. But he sent his son Eliphaz to go and murder Yaakov. But Eliphaz, his favorite uncle, his only uncle, was also his favorite uncle, was Yaakov. So he comes to Yaakov and says, I have a problem, uncle. My father said, I got to kill you. I don't want to kill you. So what should I do? So Yaakov said to him, take all of my belongings, even my clothing, and I'll be considered an oni. An oni is an impoverished, poor person. An oni chashuv kemes. An oni, a poor, impoverished person, is considered like dead. And that way you can go back and not lie and say that, yes, you left me as dead. So he had literally nothing when he left. All he had was his walking stick. And now look what he has. So that generated in Yaakov this extreme level of humility, so extreme that he was scared of Esav, and it was justified. So even though the Eibishter promised him everything, and the Eibishter promised to protect him, because he was exceedingly small in his own estimation, because of the multitude of chasadim, which is expressed in the idea of kiva makli, etc. And therefore he's not worthy. Ukedai, he's not considered klal le'notzel. He's not, Eniroi is unfit, Ve'nekedai, he's not worthy at all, klal le'notzel, to be saved. I know you promised me that you'll save me. I don't deserve it even, after all the tremendous chasadim that you have performed to me. That really doesn't answer our question properly, because if the Eibishter promised him that he's going to save him, then why are you still feeling not confident that the Eibishter is going to save you? Even though the chasadim were tremendous, from rags to riches, which is a tremendous thing, much more than what the Eibishter has to give somebody. But nonetheless, the question is still a question. The Eibishter promised you. So the Alter Rebbe finishes off and he says, there was another consideration as well, which justified his fear of Esav. Not just the humility that came from the extreme blessings that Eibishter gave him, but there's another consideration. As our sages tell us in the Gemara, Shema Yigre Machet, that Yaakov was also concerned about something else, that perhaps there was a chet, perhaps there was something, chet literally means a sin. Perhaps there was a sin which could cause him not to be saved. Not just that he felt humble and extremely humbled from everything, from the rags to riches that Eibishter gave him, give him akli, but there was another consideration as well. And that is Shema Yigre Machet, that perhaps there was a sin which might have gotten in the way, which makes him even more undeserving. Because as the Alter Rebbe explains, Shenidme be'enov shechoto. He had considered, he had appeared into himself, perhaps he had sinned, and therefore, together with all the kindnesses that the Eibishter performed him, so that would be what Rashi says, well, he used up all of his points, together with the quality of person who he is, that perhaps he doesn't deserve any more kindnesses. Not just he doesn't have the points, so he doesn't have a justification for the kindness because he has no points anymore. But he also doesn't even deserve anything because perhaps I've sinned, and Shema Yigre Machet, and the sin can cause that I don't deserve anything. Because he imagined in his mind that he had sinned. Of course, Yaakov hadn't sinned. Now, what do we mean over here when we say chet? What are we concerned? That perhaps he stopped on the way and he went in the service station and ate something he shouldn't eat because he was very hungry on his way back from Lavan, back to Canaan. What exactly sin did Yaakov Avinu commit exactly? So clearly, we're not talking about chet in the al chet definition of a regular sin. The word chet is explained in other places. Chet can mean sin literally, but chet can also mean chisarim, means something lacking, something missing. Something missing and something lacking, that can be by anyone, not just a sinner. And therefore, it doesn't mean necessarily here that Yaakov was concerned that he committed a sin. That's nonsense. Yaakov, again, we live in a world where humility is very much misunderstood. What is humility? Humility isn't making myself small and making believe that I'm not who I am. That I'm 6 foot tall, and instead of being a basketball player, I'm going to be a horse race jockey. That's not humility. That's just denying the reality. If the Eibishter gave me a blessing that I can do certain things, if I'm 6 foot tall, then I have to be a basketball player. Not to make believe and humble that I'm not really capable of doing that. That's what's explained in Chassidus. To recognize one's gifts that Hashem has given, and that the humility is to recognize them that they're gifts of the Eibishter, not that they are my own achievements. That's humility. That's a genuine humility. So to say that I'm bad and I'm bad when I'm not bad, that's not humility. That's nonsense. The Alter Rebbe is not saying that Yaakov Avinu thought he sinned. He clearly didn't sin. He was Yaakov Avinu. Rather, he was concerned that perhaps he wasn't as good as he could be. That's chet, means a chisoren, that something is lacking, that something's missing. And this is what's explained elsewhere. This is the terror that a tzaddik has, that perhaps I'm not as good as I can be. And this is really something that every one of us, there's when the Rebbe explains it, when Moshe Rabbeinu says that he writes in Chumash, that Moshe Rabbeinu was the humblest, Ish Moshe Onov, he's the humblest person from anyone al Pnei Adam. So what does that mean? Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know who he was. He didn't know he's such a great Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was humble and feared that perhaps because of who he is, and he knows who he is he fulfilling his full potential of what he's capable of what he should be doing. He's someone that the Eibishter spoke to him and appointed him as the messenger to take the Yidden out of Golos. Am I, Moshe Rabbeinu, living up to what I should be doing? And that applies to everyone at their own level. Am I doing what I need to be doing? Am I fulfilling my potential? There's a story that Reb Zusha Anipola, the famous Reb Zusha Anipola, his letter is printed at the beginning of Tanya. We learned his letter on Yitis Kislev in the Chitas. He gave an Haskama, a letter of approbation to the Tanya. And Reb Zusha Anipola was on his deathbed, so he was weeping, the story goes. So they asked him, Zusha, Rebbe, what are you crying about? What do you got to worry about? You have nothing to be worried about. You're coming to the next world. You're going to, everything is good. You're the great Zusha Anipola. So he says to them, you don't get it. He says, if they're going to ask me when I come to the next world, why wasn't I like Avraham Avinu? Or why wasn't I like Moshe Rabbeinu, etc.? I have no problem. The Eibishter spoke to Avraham Avinu, the Eibishter spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu, all the Nevi'im. That's what, I have a very ready excuse why I wasn't like them. My concern is that they're going to say to me, Zusha, if avos bist du nicht gewesen Zusha. Why weren't you the best you can be? Just 1 second here. Let me just 1 minute. So Zusha's fear in his deathbed is not, why wasn't I like Moshe Rabbeinu? That was never my ambition to be like Moshe Rabbeinu. That's nonsense. My fear is, why or did I fulfill the best that I was able to fulfill? And if I didn't, then I'm a Baal Chet. I am a sinner in the sense of Chet, meaning something missing and something lacking. And that is really what was terrifying Yaakov Avinu. Not just that I don't deserve kindnesses, because I don't deserve another kindness, because the Eibush has already performed so much kindness with me. But perhaps I have a chait. He imagined, it appeared to him in his eyes, so to speak, that he was missing, he could have done better, and therefore undeserving of this, another tremendous chesed of the Eibishter, on top of all the chasadim that the Eibishter had performed with him until now. So that is the end of the Alter Rebbe's description of what should be the healthy reaction to chasadim of the Eibishter. As we said earlier, right? There's two ways it can go. The reaction can be feeling smug and great within myself, about myself, or the reaction can be extreme humility. And Alter Rebbe is saying that on the Kedusha side, that is the reaction, the healthy reaction should be extreme humility. The greater the chasadim, the more humble one should feel. In other words, that if the Eibishter has blessed us not just with the regular routine day-to-day things, but the Eibishter has blessed us with extra success, whether it's affluence or health or whatever it is, years and so on, we have to feel very humbled, extremely and exceedingly humbled before the Eibishter for all of these blessings. Not proud. Well, the Eibishter is giving me, I deserve it. Look, the Eibishter is giving me a reward, which could be true as well. But that's not for a person to make that cheshbon. Rather, the reaction, the healthy reaction from this tremendous hug should be extreme humility. Because the other type of reaction is what the Alter Rebbe says now, comes from Klippa. The alternative comes from Klippa. Sheinkin bazelu mazeh. Sheinkin, it's different. Zelu mazeh. The Alter Rebbe, we just had it now in Chitas the other day. When the Alter Rebbe, in the beginning of Tanya, if you remember, when he introduces and the Nefesh Habamis in Perek Vov, Perek Zayin, he says Vov or Zayin. He says till now he told us what the Nefesh Elikis is, but then the Eibishter created Zelu Mazeh, one opposite the other, the Nefesh Habamis. So he says Vajenkin Zelu Mazeh, on the other side, the side which is the opposite, otherwise known as the Sitra Achara on the other side. Zelu Mazeh, the counter side, the opposite. The other side of this, which we refer to as Chesed of Avraham, is Yishmael. Yishmael is Chesed of Klippa. Avraham Avinu was the symbol of Chesed. Yitzchak was the symbol of Gevura. And Yaakov was the symbol of Tiferes. So Avraham Avinu, who was the symbol, the personification of Chesed, so what did he produce? He produced a Chesed of Klippa. He produced a Yitzchak, which was Gevura. But the one who was like Avraham in Chesed was Yishmael, but that was Chesed of Klippa. What's the difference between Chesed of Kedusha and the Chesed of Klippa? So, and Yitzchak, who's Gevura, produced an Esav, who's Chesed of Gevura. So we're not going to go into all the details now, but here he's referring to Yishmael, who's Chesed of Klippa. He personifies the attribute of Chesed, but the Chesed of Klippa. So if Avraham Avinu is all about kindness to others, that's Chesed of Kedusha. Chesed of Klippa is kindness to oneself, a selfish kindness, an unholy kindness. Hence, the descendants of Yishmael himself and the descendants of Yishmael, harems with many wives and so on, living a very flamboyant, lavish type of life. Very much self-love, self-chesed. As opposed to Avraham and his descendants, who the notion of chesed is to others. That's in a very simple, basic form and understanding the difference between the chesed of Avraham and chesed of Yishmael. So he says, when the reaction to the chasad of the Eibishter is humility, that's chesed of Kedusha. When the reaction is the other way around, arrogance, as a reaction to the chasadim of the Eibishter, that already is the level of Yishmael, known as chesed of Klippa. That's the counterpart of Avram, Avram personifies chesed of Kedusha, Yishmael personifies chesed of Klippa, which is the opposite reaction. And what happens over there in chesed of Klippa? Kol shah chesed gadol, the greater the chesed, hu heilig v'gadol begeva v'gatzes haruach v'rechav libay. The greater the chesed, the more his reaction, the more he goes with begeva in height, so to speak, v'gatzes haruach, in pride and arrogance, Verechav liboy, and literally means broadness of the heart, self-satisfaction. Look at me. Look at the wonderful things the Eibusher has given me. Look how great I am. Look what I can buy. Look what I can spend. Look what kind of great person I am. I must be doing something right. Look how good the Eibusher is blessing me. That is the exact opposite reaction that Chesed of Kedusha would react. How Chesed of Kedusha would react. And this, the Alter Rebbe is telling us, is what we must always be on guard, not to fall into the trap of Chesed of Klippa, but rather to always be aware that when Hashem performs kindnesses for us, and He performs many kindnesses with us, our reaction should be humility and even extreme humility, especially if there's the bigger, out of the ordinary chasadim that the Eibusher performs with us. Okay, that is the first part of the Alter Rebbe's letter over here. Now, the Alter Rebbe is going to say, based on this understanding, now let's deal with this practically with the current celebration of Yites Kislev. Because what can be the reaction? What's the reaction when the two parties argue and one wins? So, you all remember when we were kids, when you were children? Na, 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 na. Yeah? You're familiar with that? That's as kids. So the Alter Rebbe now is not, obviously we're not talking about children here, people are sitting with the Alter Rebbe, but the Alter Rebbe is saying what the reaction could be, and therefore he's coming to say what the reaction should be. So he continues. Therefore, accordingly, based on the above, Bossi min hamidim, I am coming here, min hamidim, like amongst those who are coming to announce, Moido Rabba, I'm coming to announce a very big announcement, Liklolos Anash, to all of Anash. This applies to everybody. Al Ribu Yachasodim Asher Higdil Hashem Lasis Imanu. Regarding the tremendous chasadim, the multitude of chasadim that the Eibusher has done with us. Higdil Hashem Lasis Imanu is a pasuk in Tilim. Remember what I told you last time. The Alter Rebbe paraphrases lots of verses from Tanakh in his letters, the way he writes. So regarding the tremendous kindness that the Eibusher has performed with us, Higdil Hashem Lasis Imanu is, so it says, it doesn't say the word chesed, it says Higdil. He did big, like Godam. But if you remember in davening, we say every morning in davening in Vayivarech David. At the beginning of Vayivarech David, in the Tilas Hashem Seder, it's on top of the page. When you turn the page on the top right, over there we say L'cho Hashem Hagdula V'Agvura V'Tiferes V'Netzach V'Heid. We also say it in Shul when the Sefer Torah is taken out. So over there it goes through the 7 midas. The first midah of Chesed, it doesn't say Chesed, it says L'cho Hashem Hagdula, and then Hagvura Tiferes V'Netzach V'Heid. The first midah of Chesed is referred to over there as Gdula. So that's what this pasuk here. So he's saying we're making an announcement to all of Anash regarding the Ribu Chasadim Asher Higdil Hashem Lasas Imanu, that Hashem has done these great kindnesses with us. So what is my announcement? My announcement is the reaction to these great kindnesses that Eibusher has performed with us. Lecha is b'mideisav shel Yaakov. The warning is, and the announcement is, that the reaction should be Lecha is b'mideisav shel Yaakov, to hold on to the attribute of Yaakov. That should be our reaction, as he's going to elaborate. We should grasp. Lecha is to grasp. We should hold. We should take upon ourselves the attribute of Yaakov, like in this pasuk that we just quoted. His reaction to the Eibusher's kindnesses, which is She'er Amoy v'She'eres Yisrael. Yidden are known as, again, we're bringing a pasuk from Yeshaya and from Yirmiyah. One place it says She'er Amoy, the remnant of his people. The other place says She'eres Yisrael, the remnant of the remainder of Yisrael. Meaning that a Yid has within him, the Nevi'im are saying, we have within us a sense of feeling of a remnant, which is, in other words, the humility. It's a euphemism for humility. To feel as a remnant, to feel as extra, to feel as to feel humbled. Regarding oneself as trivial, as remnants, as something that has there's no need. In other words, superfluous or even dispensable. Very extreme terms. To feel such humility that really I'm not even needed here. That's the extreme level of humility. I'm not important. So he's saying that should be our reaction. By telling us these extreme levels of humility, the Alter Rebbe is really defining the extreme level of kindness that the Eibishter performed. The Alter Rebbe here is telling us, before he even goes to tell us how should be our reaction to the opposers of Chassidus, the Alter Rebbe wants us to appreciate how great Yutis Kislev is. You can have a whole farbrengen just on this point that the Alter Rebbe is telling us here. Between the lines, what's the Alter Rebbe telling us over here? Till now, we spoke about Ofer Ve'efer, the level of humility of Avraham Avinu of dust and ashes. Dust and ashes still can have a function and a purpose. You can still do something with it. They can be productive in some level. Here, the Alter Rebbe is saying that the reaction we should take on the reaction that we are what? That you're totally useless. There's no need for you. That's the level of humility here. Meaning that the chasodim of Yutis Kislev is so great that our reactive humility has to be in this extreme. The more you appreciate the chasodim of Yutis Kislev, the more humble you should be. He's telling us that the chasodim are of the extreme greatness, that the reaction should be this extreme level of humility. No one needs you, even. Not saying that no one needs you. That's obviously not a healthy perspective on ourselves. What he's saying is that the reaction of humility that should be to such an extreme that he uses that we are no more than shirayim, leftovers. You finish your meal and you have leftovers on the plate. Meisres, superfluous. She'ein b'tzerech, which is dispensable. So what I'm pointing out is, by this, the Alter Rebbe is explaining to us the other extreme of how great was the chesed of Yutis Kislev, which we don't usually, Yutis Kislev is a nice day. We get together and we celebrate, and wonderful. If not for Yutis Kislev, and we, Chassidim have been farbrengen for Yutis Kislev 200 and whatever how many years. In these few words here, the Alter Rebbe is trying to drive home. We don't even begin to understand how great was the bracha and the chesed and the victory of Yutis Kislev. The way you want to know how big was Yutis Kislev, look at the results that the Alter Rebbe expects us to have in our humility. From that, you'll be able to gauge how great was Yutis Kislev. But in any case, back to the subject that he's saying over here. The reaction should be this extremely extreme level of humility. That should be our reaction. And therefore, lebilti reim levava machem, which means in practical terms that you should not raise your hearts over your brethren, meaning don't feel big, don't feel arrogant and haughty over your brethren, meaning the opponents of Chassidus. The natural reaction is that now you've been vindicated. So you're going to go around very proud that you've been vindicated, that Chassidus won and Chassidus is now able to be taught. It's a tremendous event. It is a tremendous simcha. And it's very true. But don't feel not to raise your hearts over your brothers who caused the arrest of the Alter Rebbe, which would have been a justified reaction. It's not a bad thing. You have what to be proud of. So this is very much something to be proud of, especially in those days when people weren't born into it. They chose it out of their own appreciation of what Chassidus has to give. So he says you have what to be proud with, but that shouldn't be our reaction. The reaction should be extreme humility, even though your pride is very much justified. And also another thing, literally means don't open your mouth wide, which is translated as not to jeer. Or don't whistle. Chas v'shalom. These three things of having this haughtiness or jeering or whistling, though they are justified, you have what to be proud about, don't do it. Because I want you to take upon yourself the attribute of Yaakov, this extreme humility. Has mila haskir, and a strict warning. Be'azhara neira. Be'azhara neira means a strict warning. Has mila haskir, mention nothing. Has mila haskir, mention nothing. Be'azhara neira, with a strict warning. Rather, again, he drives home again. What should be your reaction? Rak lahashpil rucha v'libam. Rather, or rak only to lahashpil, to subdue rucha v'libam, to subdue your spirit and your heart. B'midas emes l'Yaakov, again with this midah of emes of Yaakov. Remember the beginning we said that he says that. Sorry, not the beginning when we mentioned Avraham Avinu. So it said. Sorry, at the beginning it says katenti b'kol hachasadim b'kol ha'emes. The pasuk says. That was in the V'gomer at the very beginning. And then when we mentioned Avraham Avinu, we mentioned before that that this is the attribute of Avraham Avinu. So we brought the pasuk that Avraham Chesed LaAvraham. So over there is a pasuk that says that the Eibishter grants Emes LiYaakov and Chesed LaAvraham. That Yaakov is the attribute of Chesed. So he says, Rak lahashmil rucham v'libam, I want you to subdue your spirit and your heart with the midah, b'midas ha'emes LiYaakov, with the attribute of Emes, of Yaakov, mipnei kol adam, before any person. There is nobody where you will be justified to whistle or jeer or feel above them. It's justified, but don't do that. Take on the attribute of Yaakov, who's humble before every person, b'nemichas ruach, with humility of spirit, u'mainerach, and a soft answer. And as he again, quoting a pasuk, in Mishlei, rach meshiv chema. A soft answer alleviates anger. Someone's angry, and if you answer them softly, that will soften them too. You're going to shout back, they're going to shout back. You're just going to have a shouting match. So he says, how should you? We have to deal. These are our brethren. These are other Jews. So how should we deal with them? I told you what not to deal with them. How should you deal with them? Deal with them in the attribute of Yaakov, nemichas ruach, with humility, with a soft answer, v'ruach necheya, with a restrained spirit. Then the Alter Rebbe ends up with a very optimistic note. If we're going to react this way, then maybe, then perhaps, hopefully, yitin Hashem b'leiv achayim, Hashem will give into the hearts of your brethren, the opponents of Chassidus, He'll put into their hearts a corresponding reaction to you, kamayim haponim, etc. Kamayim haponim is again a pasuk in Mishlei, famous pasuk. Kamayim haponim kein leva adam adam. That like water reflects the face. If you look into water, you're going to see your face. So too, says Mishlei, so too is Lev Ha'adam, the heart of man, to the heart of one person to another person. The way you approach another person, that's the way they will react to you. And you approach them with love, they will react with love. Today it's called body language and so on. If one approaches somebody else in an aggressive way, then they feel intimidated. You approach them in a loving, kind way, then they're more receptive. So the Alter Rebbe is saying, our mission is to spread Chassidus. So even though it's true that we won and you have what to be justified, they put him in prison and then the whole thing. But what's that going to help in fulfilling our mission? Our mission is to spread and teach Chassidus. So that has to be done in a kind way, in a pleasant way, in a way that, as he says, that will reflect in them, will reflect how we are feeling. So hopefully, he says, if we behave and react to this tremendous victory of Yitas Kislev in the proper, holy way, like Yaakov Avinu, then maybe, hopefully, the Eibishter will put into their hearts the desired reaction that we hope, the reaction of Kamayim Aponim. So that's the letter that the Alter Rebbe writes to the Chassidim. Now, the Hayem Yem, I just want to read to you, it's a beautiful Hayem Yem of Yud Menachemov. And over there, he brings a sikha of the Frierdiker Rebbe from that he says in the name of his grandfather, the Rebbe Marash. So the Rebbe Marash said two stories. This is not Yem Yem. The Rebbe Marash said two stories. Number one, that in the original version, this letter of Katenti would end by these words of Ruach Nechei Achulu. The last words of Achulu Hai V'ulai was not in the original letter. Later on in Lozhne, the Alter Rebbe said a mimer on the words Kamayim upon him, and when the Alter Rebbe said it 3 times, with the interpretation, explaining it with the interpretation of Rashi, which I've just told you, that's when he added on the words V'chulu Hai V'ulai, the last line of this letter. And with this, says the Rebbe Marash, he implanted in the hearts of Chassidim Midas Tevis. He implanted in Chassidim Midas Tevis with this V'kula Hai V'ulai. That there's always a chance, and therefore we have to have good midas, because what we do will hopefully generate that the Eibishter will implant in others' hearts the positive reaction that should be. So with this, the Alter Rebbe adding on these words, this is where he implanted in the hearts of Chassidim better midas. That's story number 1. Story number 2 is, earlier on, just 2 lines earlier, the Alter Rebbe says, B'midas emes liyakiv, right? Those 3 words. The Alter Rebbe says our reaction should be that we should take upon ourselves the midah of emes of Yaakov. So he says, the story that Rebbe Marash says, that when the Alter Rebbe would nicht gestellt die drei, if the Alter Rebbe would not put in these 3 words of midas emes liyakiv, which means the attribute of truth of Yaakov, wollte gehat noch 50,000 Chassidim. He would have had 50,000 more Chassidim if he would not have put in these 3 words. Aber der Rebbe mont midas emes. But the Alter Rebbe demands emes. That has to be with an emes. Not a fake make-believe type of kindness. He wants an emes that, in other words, what's a fake make-believe kindness is that I'm kind because, but in my heart, I really can't stand his guts. That's not midas emes liyakiv. The Alter Rebbe wants that it should be genuine. And if he would not have put in these 3 words, he would have had 50,000 more followers. And he gave up on the 50,000 because, as he says, the Rebbe wants emes. The Alter Rebbe wants emes. That's just 2 interesting things about here, the end of this letter in this.
Excuse me, I don't understand why those 3 words would make an effect on having
Midas emes leYaakov. So perhaps it's another subject for the whole share just of that. Midas emes leYaakov means, as I said, genuine emes, not make believe. To genuinely feel for the other person, to have a sense of closeness with the other person, so that hopefully that other person will then be attracted to come and learn Chassidus and not be in the opposition to Chassidus. That when one performs emes for the other person, it should be a genuine emes. The chesed is a chesed. But why am I doing the chesed? What's motivating me to do the chesed? There can be many reasons. But not necessarily is it a real chesed. So it's not an emes chesed. So it means that I got to search within myself, not just when I'm doing the chesed. Do the chesed, I did the chesed. But then what is, the chesed is a chesed. Take, for example, a chesed of giving a hungry person food. The person is filled. He's not hungry anymore. That's true. Now we're talking about something else. What is within me? What was the feeling of performing this chesed within me? Am I performing chesed because I want the Eibishter to give me a reward? Am I performing chesed because I want to be seen as nice? Do I performing chesed because I myself want to be as nice? What is the motivation within me? Midas emes liyaakov means that it's being done with a genuine emes. For no other reason, perhaps it's just for them because that's what has to be done. But that's an emes.
You're saying that these people could not commit to doing.
It's a level of emes that requires a lot of self-introspection and a lot of work on oneself. And that's a level that the Alter Rebbe demands of us Chassidim that not everyone is capable of reaching. Yeah, that's what it means. So he would have had 50,000 more people with a lesser degree of emes, a more shallow degree of emes. But the Alter Rebbe wants emes. we learned in Likutei Amarim in Tanya, we have over there, the Alter Rebbe mentions, in Tanakh, there's emes and there's sfas emes, different levels of emes. When emes is emes, no, you can say truth is truth. There's different levels, even in truth, there's different levels. And that's what he's saying over here. Right. Fine. So we'll leave it there for today.